Most cults don't start with violence. They start with answers. In the late 1970s, a man named Roch Thériault appeared in Quebec, offering something dangerously seductive: certainty. He told people who felt lost, disconnected, or afraid of the future that God had chosen him personally, that the world was ending, and that only those who followed him would survive. And some people believed him. Not because they were stupid, but because he spoke with absolute conviction. Calm, confident, reassuring. He didn't sound insane, he sounded sure. Thériault reinvented himself as a prophet. He renamed himself Moïse, Moses, and gave his followers biblical names too. That's important, because once someone renames you, they're not just leading you anymore, they're rewriting you. He convinced a small group to abandon their lives and retreat into the wilderness, where they would wait out the apocalypse together. Jobs were quit, families were cut off, normal life was left behind. They hiked deep into remote land and built a commune from scratch. Thériault watched them work, hauling wood, building shelters, cooking, cleaning. He joked that they looked like ants working for the colony. That's how they got their name. The Anthill Kids. At first, it probably felt peaceful, purposeful, like they had escaped a broken world. But then February 1979 arrived, and the world didn't end. This is the moment most people think a cult should fall apart. Instead, it hardened. Thériault calmly explained that divine time and human time don't align. The prophecy wasn't wrong, it was misunderstood. And by that point, his followers had already sacrificed too much to walk away. Their old lives were gone. Their identities were wrapped around him. Doubt didn't make them leave. Doubt made them cling tighter. As isolation deepened, Thériault's control became total. Contact with outsiders was forbidden. Speaking without permission was punished. Privacy disappeared. He claimed God told him what people were thinking, what sins they were hiding. And then he crossed the most predictable cult line of all. He claimed sexual excess was God's will. He took every woman in the group as a wife or concubine. Refusal wasn't disobedience to a man, it was disobedience to God. Over time, he fathered dozens of children inside the commune, framing it as the creation of a pure new generation. And that's when the tone shifted. Rules turned into punishments. Punishments turned into violence. At first it was beatings, whippings, public humiliation, pain disguised as discipline. But it didn't stop there. Thériault needed more than obedience, he needed fear. Followers were forced to harm themselves, to hurt each other, to endure degrading acts designed not just to punish, but to erase resistance. Because once you've been made to hurt someone else for a leader, leaving means facing what you've done. Children weren't spared. They grew up watching violence treated as holy. They were abused, neglected, and taught that suffering was purification. At least one infant died after being left outside in freezing temperatures because obedience mattered more than instinct. By the early 1980s, Thériault had stopped pretending this was about salvation. It was about control, and then he took it one step further. He started playing doctor. With no medical training, he claimed you could heal through divine power. In reality, he performed brutal, amateur procedures on followers, cutting into bodies, injecting substances, inflicting pain under the guise of treatment. In 1981, a young child in the commune died after severe injuries. Thériault was arrested and served a short sentence. But here's what makes cults terrifying. The group didn't dissolve. They waited for him. When he got out, they relocated even deeper into isolation, this time in Ontario, far from scrutiny, far from help. Authorities began to notice injuries, filthy conditions, children living in disturbing circumstances. But intervention was slow and limited. Adults insisted everything was fine, so officials focused on the children. In 1985, multiple kids were removed from the compound. Once outside, some began to talk. Abuse, sexual violence, punishments no child should even know exist. Still, Thériault remained free. Until 1988. One of his wives, Solange Boyard, suffered ongoing pain. Thériault declared he would cure her himself. What followed wasn't treatment. It was ritualized torture. In front of followers, he performed a grotesque, untrained operation. He cut into her body. Others were forced to assist. Solange died from her injuries the next day. But even then, it didn't stop. Thériault claimed he could bring her back to life. He subjected her body to further ritual abuse, convinced his own delusions gave him power over death itself. When resurrection didn't happen, Solange was secretly buried. That murder broke something. One woman, Gabrielle Lavallee, had endured years of extreme torture under Thériault. Multiple escape attempts, brutal punishments, permanent injuries. But after Solange's death, Gabrielle escaped again. And this time, she went to the authorities. She told them everything. That testimony shattered the cult. Police arrested Thériault. The remaining followers scattered. Investigators uncovered the full scale of his crimes. In 1993, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a life sentence. The Anthill kids were over, but the damage wasn't. Some followers remained psychologically tied to him for years. Some visited him in prison. That's how deep coercive control runs. It doesn't end in 2011. He was killed by his cellmate, stabbed in the neck. A violent end for a man who built his power through violence. But this story isn't really about how he died. It's about how he lived, and how easily certainty can become a weapon. Cults don't begin with chains. They begin with answers. With someone offering meaning when life feels empty. Certainty when the future feels terrifying. Belonging when you feel alone. And slowly, the price of staying becomes your freedom. First your time, then your relationships, then your ability to doubt, until leaving doesn't feel possible. The Anthill kids weren't monsters. They were people who trusted the wrong man. And that's what makes this story truly horrifying.